This week's Parsha Chayei Sarah. So, we've hardly been introduced to Avram Avinu and Sarah Imenu, when this week already Sarah Imenu passes away, and at the end of the Parsha, Avram Avinu also passes away. So we've only had a couple of weeks with them, and already we're without them, moving on to the next stage. So the beginning of the Parsha talks about how Avram Avinu goes searching for a burial plot for his wife Sarah Imenu. We found out that the custom among some Irish people is that they don't bury straight away. In fact, they take the deceased and they bring the deceased back home with them. And what do? I'm sorry if this is going to disturb anybody. Please, I'll say this. If it's, anybody who's squeamish, we should turn off now. Go and listen to last year's and the years before share. There's one called The Sanctuary, and there's one called The Prisoner of Avarice, two of my shirim from previous lives. Go listen to those. It's not as gory as what I'm going to mention now. Anyway, what do? They take the deceased, they take him home, they prop him or her up in a chair, and then they bring the living family members and they take pictures. Yeah? It's macabre, but this is a reality. And what do we hear? My wife heard that there was somebody who actually propped up his father. Was it? No. His father had been photographed sitting in a chair, and of all the things, they put in his hand, in this dead man's hand, a pint of beer. That was, for them, the pièce de résistance. That was the final parting message that they could give to all of them on earth. Here I am, and this is what I wish I was doing. Maybe he is doing it. Who knows? I don't know. Strange, macabre. But it's a reality. And it's happening now. And it happened recently, as we heard, to somebody. Happened recently, they took pictures with the deceased. Now, Lahavdil Elef Hafei Havdalot, we're going to talk about what Avram Avinu did with his wife. It says the pasuk in the beginning of the parasha, the third pasuk, or fourth pasuk rather. Ger v'toshav anochi imachem, tnu li achuzat kever imachem. We talked previously in previous shiurim about how Avram Avinu met Ephron from the Hittite tribe. Ephron was the newly appointed leader of the Hittites, and he approached him and he said, "Give me a burial plot. Have you got anything lying about? Any spare land you want to sell?" And of course, that was not Avram Avinu's intention to go and pick any place that he was offered. He actually did this to sort of, in a way, put Ephron off the scent. He didn't want Ephron to know that he was looking for this particular plot of Machpelah, according to the Midrash. Because otherwise, if Ephron would have twigged that there was something that he had, a plot of land that he could sell that had Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve buried there, then he would have charged, I don't know, he already charged a lot of money, but who knows what he would have charged. Maybe he wouldn't have, he would have put such a high price tag, even Avram Avinu wouldn't have been able to afford it. And Avram Avinu was a multi-billionaire. So he said, give me an estate, give me a place to bury my wife. So then the deal was done. Okay, we know that initially Ephron started by saying, "I'll give it to you for free." And like all Rushaim, all evil people, they say a little and they talk big, they talk magnanimous, and they do nothing. Because his magnanimous gesture did not exist after that. He said, "I'll give it to you for free." And then he put a huge price tag on it. So why did Avram Avinu go to such lengths? And Avram Avinu paid that money for it. Why did Avram Avinu go to such lengths to buy this burial plot where the first man and the first woman were buried? And I'll tell you a story which will give you an idea why he went to such lengths to go and find this burial plot. So the story happened about maybe, I think 50 years ago, with Rav Moshe Sternbuch, who went to become a Rav in South Africa. So when he came to South Africa, he was, let's say, concerned. I'm not going to say appalled. I'm sure he was appalled, but let's use the word concerned. He was concerned that there were people who were part of the burial society who were burying people who were not so orthodox, let's say they were not Shomrei Shabbat, burying them to people who were orthodox. They were mixing everybody in the same plot. And he gave a public announcement and he said, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't mix people of different levels of observance next to each other. So, hard to believe that in South Africa there would be such a furore, but there was a furore. And people were decrying him and saying, how could he come and question our methods and our motives, and there was a whole big thing. In the end, Rabbi Sternbuch had to get up and make the following announcement. He said, there is a reason why we bury people of different levels within their own, people of their own level. So people who are not Shomrei Shabbat, we bury them, those together. People who are on a much higher level, tzaddikim, etc., we bury them in a different place. Why? It's not discrimination. The answer is that, if you think about it, when somebody who is a tzaddik, he's buried, he's a known Rav, or he's a known somebody who did a lot of pious deeds in his lifetime, is buried next to somebody who broke Shabbat in public, then the accusation in Shamayim is on the person who did not keep Shabbat. They say, look, how come you deserve a place next to the tzaddik, next to the person who spent his whole life dedicated to Hashem, and you spent your life breaking Hashem's mitzvot? So, of course, the person who was on that lower level, who never kept the mitzvot as he was supposed to do, is going to be compared directly to somebody who's way, way above him. But if you keep the people segregated together, people who maybe were not on the level that they should be at the time they passed away, you keep them together, then of course they're not going to escape judgment. People will judge on whatever level they are, but they're not going to be held to be judged off the scale. They're not going to be compared to people who were way, way, way over and above them in their lifetime. So this was the reason why Avraham Avinu searched for the best burial plot he could find. What better than the burial plot of the ancestors of creation, Adam and Eve? And he wanted to be the next link in that, together with that holy zivug, that holy partnership. He wanted to be there. He wanted his wife to be there, and ultimately he wanted to be there. And we know that at the end, after all the Avot died, there were 4 couples who were buried there: Adam and Eve, Avram and Sarah, Yitzhak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah. We know Rachel was buried somewhere else. Rachel was buried on the way. That will come to that Bezrat Hashem in a few weeks' time. So anyway, you see the point that Avraham Avinu wanted nothing but the best for his wife, because his wife was on such a high level that this is the only place that she could possibly have been buried. So moving on to the next Perek Chaf Dalet. I'm going to talk a little bit about Avraham Avinu and his trusty servant Eliezer. So if you move to Perek Chaf Dalet, Pasuk Beit, Vayomer Avraham el Avdo. Now here I should preface actually to tell you what's happening here. Avraham Avinu is sending Eliezer to go and find a wife for Yitzchak. Now, He's not going to send anybody. He's not going to send the mailman. He's not going to go and send, the boot polisher. He's going to send somebody who he trusted implicitly to go and find a shidduch for his son. So look at how the Torah describes Eliezer. It says, Zakan Beito, who was the elder of his household, Hamoshel b'chol asher lo, the person who looked after everything that he had. Now I just told you Avraham Avinu was a multi-billionaire. His property portfolio was, again, it was off the scale. Whatever he had much, much more than anybody else. So he had to have somebody who was in charge of all his material possessions. That person was Eliezer. So he was Avraham Avinu's right-hand man. So if you have somebody in this position that you're trusting him with your entire fortune and your entire estate, he's got to be somebody who you trust implicitly. But then, bearing that in mind, the next part of the pasuk doesn't make sense. He says to his servant, Simna yatcha tachat yirechi. Put your hand under my thigh. What does this mean? What is this strange ritual? Put your hand under my thigh? So the Mefarshim tell us that it means that Avraham Avinu was enduring Eliezer, who's telling him, look, you're going on this mission, you put your hand under my thigh, that means you have to promise me. It was a gesture which was, in effect, Avraham Avinu was asking Eliezer, I want you to promise me, not just promise, I want you to swear to me, make a shivu'ah, like a neder, an irrevocable agreement. And you do that, the symbolism of putting the hand under the thigh was to show that he was making an oath, a solemn oath. So the question is asked, Avraham Avinu, you're trusting this guy with everything that you have. Anybody who is less than 100% trustworthy will make off with the silver, he's going to make off with a few cows here and there, he's going to have his hands in the till. None of this came out. Avraham Avinu doesn't expect him at all of any of this. So why is he making him make a promise? I want you to make a promise, you're going to choose somebody from my family. You only go for the best. You only go for what I tell you to go for. What's this? Suddenly now he doesn't trust him? What's happened? Does he trust Eliezer? Or he doesn't trust Eliezer? So I'll tell you the following story that I read. Beautiful story with Rav Yisrael Salanta, the head of the Mussar movement. So Rav Yisrael Salanta was once going through on his travels and he came to an inn. He stopped at an inn and checked in, and the innkeeper there, he was also in charge of the restaurant as well. He was serving the food to the people staying in the hotel. And when he checked in his inventory, he saw he didn't have enough meat. So he saw that he didn't know it was Rav Yisrael Salanta, the innkeeper. He just saw there was somebody with a long beard. He looked very holy. So he approached and he said, Rabbi, I've run out of meat and I need kosher chickens. In those days there was no Menachem's, the butchers, there was no kosher deli and whatever. If you want meat, you have to take the chicken and shecht it. So this innkeeper said, Rabbi, I need some meat. If I give you some chickens from my backyard, will you be able to do shechita on these chickens for me? Rabbi Yisrael Salanta demurred. He said, I'm sorry, I'm not a shochet, I'm not a ritual slaughterer. I'm sorry, you have to ask somebody else, or you'll have to do without. I'm very, very sorry. Okay. The innkeeper said, fine, fair enough. The next day, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta came to the same innkeeper, and he said to him, he said, Rabbi, he said, I have a fantastic business deal for you. If you only invested me 100 gold coins, or whatever amount he mentioned, I will guarantee you a fantastic ROI, return on investment. You're not going to lose. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanta was going into the whole deal, and etc. And then he said to the innkeeper, okay, you want to invest? The innkeeper said, Rabbi, I'm really sorry, but I don't even know you. How can I just invest 100 gold coins with somebody who I just met yesterday? So Rabbi Salanta turned around to him and said, aha! He said, yesterday, when it came to the shechita of chickens, you were willing to trust me implicitly. You would have handed me the chickens and said, go, shech them. If I was more unscrupulous, I could have just come and said, okay, fine, and shech them, or whatever. I'm adding that bit in, by the way. But now, you come to me and I'm giving you an investment concerning money, suddenly the issue of trust comes into play. Now suddenly, I don't know you, how can I trust you, I've just met you. What happened? Avraham Avinu was exactly the opposite. When it came to money matters, of course, money is important, and you need to find somebody you trust. For this, Eliezer was completely trustworthy. There's no one better than him. He's a kan beito. He's moshel b'chol asher lo. He's in charge of everything. Nothing I have in terms of my material belongings, nothing goes past Eliezer. He's the man. He's the one in charge of everything. Oh, but when it comes to spirituality, that's a whole different level. That requires implicit trust. And perhaps also you could say, perhaps, I'm adding this in myself, I could be wrong, but I'll say it anyway, perhaps you could say, when it comes to spiritual matters, maybe the reason why Avraham Avinu made his most trusted person, Eliezer, who made him swear an oath, is because there was another factor. There was the factor of the Yetzer Hara. Because even somebody who's most trustworthy, the Yetzer Hara now can come and work on you a little bit. You know what? You don't have to go for the best girl. This won't work. This will work. Come to see this one, and then you don't have to bother. Don't worry. Avraham Avinu was just giving a vague idea. Maybe the Yetzer Hara would have sold him all sorts of lies. So now Avraham Avinu had to put him under oath and say to him, look, I'm asking you to do the job, but this is a matter which is totally different. It's totally a different type of trust. So you see, when it comes to spirituality, you need a specific set of rules. This goes way, way beyond trusting a person with material belongings. And in fact, we see this idea when Eliezer is referred to, when he actually goes on the mission to find a wife for Yitzchak, we see that there's a very lengthy description of how he met Rivka, and there was the thing with the camels, watering the camels, and then he came and he gave a dowry, and there was gold and silver, etc., and all sorts of stuff which was changing hands. And Eliezer is referred to in different ways. Some of the time he's referred to as Eved Avraham, the servant of Avraham. And sometimes he's referred to as the man, just Aish, or why is he referred to in different ways? Sometimes servant of Avraham, sometimes as just a man. So the answer is, he's referred to as a man when he's talking only about material possessions, when he's giving the gold and the silver and he's passing it on to the family of Rivka. When it comes to Eliezer himself and who he represents, he's representing Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was a prince to the nations. Avraham Avinu was a holy person. And now, I'm not, the Torah doesn't want to describe him as just an ish, a man. He's already Eved Avraham. He already has a superior calling. He's got a superior position. And that's why when it comes to matters of spirituality, reflecting on the Ruchniut, that already Eliezer took on a different calling. In the same Perek, Pasuk, where are we? Pasuk Yud Beit. At the end of the, I'll quote the whole pasuk. Vayom Hashem Elokei Adonai Avraham Akreina lefanai hayom v'aseh chesed. This is a prayer that Eliezer is offering to Hashem. He's praying to Hashem, please let the right girl appear so that we can, he was asking for a sign from Hashem. Va'aseh chesed im Adoni, do chesed with your servant Avraham, he's saying. Do chesed with your servant Avraham. Now, the Baal HaTurim says a very interesting thing here. The last words in this pasuk, I'll quote the last phrase, Va'aseh chesed im Adoni Avraham. And he's praying to Hashem, do chesed with your servant Abraham. Look at the last three words. Im Adoni Avraham. Take the last letters of those three words. Im is Mem. Adoni is Yud. Avraham is Mem. Mem, Yud, Mem spells Mayim, water. The Baal HaTurim says here that Eliezer was praying to Hashem, do a midah keneged midah, reward my master Abraham measure for measure. What's the measure for measure? Because Avraham Avinu, my master, he did a chesed with water. So please Hashem, do a chesed for your servant Avraham. He did a chesed. Avraham did a chesed. So Ribono Shel Olam, you do a chesed for him. Act measure for measure. What was this chesed with the water? Because in last week's parasha we mentioned that Avraham Avinu came and he served water, among other things, he served water to the three Arabs who were three angels. He didn't know they were angels initially. He served them water. So you can ask, what is this? Just because there was something with a bit of water, what about saying praying to Hashem, Hashem, look, what about my master who did 10 tests? Do a chesed for my master, he passed these 10 tests. Or you don't want to pray for using all of them, just say one. What about the Akedah? What about jumping into the fire? Dafka, this is the one that we see hinted that the Baal HaTurim talks about. And the Baal HaTurim actually does mention the Akedah. There's another hint in this pasuk. But I want to concentrate on what was the significance of the water. And the answer is, Eliezer was asking for chesed, and he was indicating a chesed that Avraham Avinu did. Chesed, when a person acts with loving kindness, when a person does a chesed, that type of action elicits a greater reward from Hashem, a greater payoff from Hashem, more so than passing a test like the binding of Isaac, like the Akedah. Because chesed is something that the world is based on. Le'olam chesed yiboneh. The world is structured and formed with the midah, with the attribute of chesed. We know that everything that exists, Hashem's chesed is behind it. What is chesed? Chesed is something which is one-way traffic. It comes from the giver and it's one way to the receiver. There's no payback. When you talk about pure, unadulterated chesed, there is no hope of any payback. When the person does the chesed, it's from giver to receiver. There's no like, oh, you know what, I'm doing it because the other person will owe me a favor, or he'll pay me back one day. Where the thought in the person's mind for a real true, I mean, obviously there's different levels of chesed, but true, pure, emeslik chesed comes with no hope of any return. I think the world is altruistic. It's altruistic. So Avraham Avinu did a chesed with the water. It was altruistic. It was pure chesed. Now Eliezer is invoking this, as it were, this spiritual reservoir of chesed that Avraham Avinu had created. He was saying, Hashem, now it's time to pay back my master, if you can say such a thing. To pay back my master. And how? I want you to pay him back by letting him find a shidduch for his son. And we know that. How did the shidduch come about? Through none other than water, because the whole thing was based around water. Rivka came, she watered the camels, she fed Eliezer, she gave him to drink and his servants. Everything was based around water. So you see the power of the chesed, and a chesed like that you could have easily forgotten. Oh, so Avraham really comes, he gives a little bit of water to the angels, and they made out as if they were drinking it, and that was it, finished. The whole thing was over in like a minute. You can blink and you'll miss it. But this is not the case with chesed. Chesed is something, maybe you might blink and you'll miss it, but the effect is so great. You can be part of this chesed where all the Jewish people came from there. The whole of the and if there's no Jewish people, there's no world. So it all started with this chesed, with the water. Such a beautiful idea. And finally, I'm going to let you go a little bit early today. We're going to go forward, same parak. Going to go forward to Pasuk Nun. So now, already the shidduch has been found. Now, Eliezer has secured the hand of Rivka for his master's son, Yitzchak. Now we see that the family of Rivka, they give their own particular stamp on the shidduch. What do they say? Says the pasuk, Vayan Lavan uVetuel, and Lavan and Betuel answered, Vayomru, and they said, May Hashem yatzar davar. They said, from this thing came from God. Now, you have to understand who Lavan was and who Betuel was. Lavan was the brother of Rivka. Betuel was the father of Rivka. Betuel and Lavan were two of the biggest Rishaim in the whole Chumash. Lavan himself, we see later on, he tried many, many times to cheat Yaakov Avinu. He even wanted to kill Yaakov Avinu. There were many things that he did that was way, way below the belt. And Betuel, even here, this is happened just before he died. How did he die? Because he wanted to poison Eliezer. He wanted to poison Eliezer and get all the money and everything for himself. And then he wouldn't have to send his daughter out as well. So these two Rishaim said, now we know it comes from God. What were they talking about? So, I'll tell you a story. In fact, I'll tell you two stories, and with this I'm going to finish. So there's a story that happened in Tzafat a few years ago. There was this Bachor, there was this single guy who was looking for shidduch. And it happened that I think he was at a wedding or wherever it was, and he spotted this girl. I don't know, maybe it wasn't a wedding because you shouldn't be in the ladies section of the wedding. Obviously it wasn't there. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe, I don't know where. He set eyes on this girl. And he thought, oh, you know, this girl, maybe this girl is somebody who might be suitable. But he didn't want to go and talk to her and introduce himself, because that's not the way. You don't do that. So, okay, he forgot about it. And then a little bit later, he found a siddur. And I don't know how he worked it out, that this siddur that was left, it had her name in it. So he's saying, oh, wow, maybe this is a sign from Shamayim. Then he comes back to where he was staying, and it turns out that he got two different messages on his answering machine. Both of these messages suggesting a shidduch for this boy. Both of them suggesting the same girl. Wow, so now he's got signs left, right and center. So what does he do? He agrees. He says, you know what? Hashem yatzar davar. This thing must come from Hashem. And he goes, he agrees to the shidduch, he goes out, they get engaged, and they get married, and a few months later they get divorced. I'm sorry to rain on your parade, I'm sorry not to give you a nice Hollywood ending. What's going on here? Ma'ashem yatzah davar. This thing came from God. So many signs. The Siddur, the fact that he saw her. I think maybe he even made inquiries. What was her name? And then he comes back and two people called. All the signs were in place. And on paper it was fantastic. How come they got divorced? The answer is I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. There's really no, I wouldn't say no such thing, but you have to be very careful when you say the words Ma'ashem yatzah davar. This thing comes from Hashem. Because if you're looking for signs, if you've got external things that point and say, come on, this is too much, it's not coincidence, and you make the shidduch based on those premises, it may not necessarily work for you. Because Hashem doesn't need to give us these signs. He wants us to go through the shidduch in a normal way. He wants us to see, is this girl Yirat Shamayim? Is she going to be the mother of my children? And she must look at him and say, is he going to be the father of my children? Is he going to bring them up in the way of the Torah? Is he going to encourage them? You've got to ask all these fundamental questions. Of course, there has to be a connection as well. But if you're looking for these external signs, that's no good. That's all right for Lavan and Betuel. That's not enough for Eliezer or for Yitzchak. They're not looking for the external signs. They want the real. They want to know. They want to go for the real thing. They want to go for these heebie-jeebie type of things. Now, as it happens, Lavan and Betuel, they were only looking at the miraculous side of things. They looked at the sign only. They only looked at the signs. For them, that was the miracle. They needed a miracle. Now I'll tell you a story which I've actually told before. It's a famous story from Rav Wallerstein. He's told it a number of times. But it shows you a different type of scenario. Rav Wallerstein tells the following story. He said he knew this particular girl, and she was a wonderful, wonderful girl. She was going out on a shidduch with this guy, and it seemed on paper, it was wonderful. And Rabbi Wallerstein was just waiting for the time when, he was going to pop the question, and they were going to get engaged or whatever. Then the girl calls up Rabbi Wallerstein and she says, Rabbi, I want to break the shidduch. Wallerstein is shocked. He says, why? It was going so well. She said, Rabbi, I know it's going well, and I like him and he likes me. But the thing is, the other day we went out for dinner, and then, the car broke down, and then it was towed, and then something went wrong with his credit card, and then my parents raised a fuss, and then all these things kept happening. And my friend said, says the girl, my friend told me that if you have all these signs happening, then it's a sign that the shidduch is not good, and you have to break it off. So, Rabbi, I'm going to break it off. So Rabbi Wallerstein, I believe he went to his Rav, which is Rav Gamliel Rabinowitz, who's a big Mekubal in Israel, and I believe it was him who gave the following eitzah. He said, imagine if you would know for sure that if this shidduch would happen, that there would be tzaddikim, there would be a lineage of holy and amazing Jewish people coming from this zivug. And it was for sure this was going to happen. And imagine now the Yetzer Hara knew that if they get married, they're going to have holy Jewish children who are going to go on their way. You think the Satan would be happy to make this shidduch happen? He'd try everything in his power to push it off. But if the Yetzer Hara knew, and he knew that these people get married, there's going to be trouble, there's going to be shalom bayim problems, there's going to be children who are coming who won't go in the ways of the Torah. You think the Yetzer Hara will be happy? For sure it's going to be happy for it to happen. Then there's no problem. So if you see things like this, external stuff going wrong, this way, that way, you should know this has got the haskamat hasatan. It's got the stamp of approval of the Satan that he wants to break it off. That Satan really gets his act together. He tries every which way to to bring ikuvim, to bring obstacles. So if that's the case, you should definitely get married. So Rabbi Wallerstein gave the advice to this girl. He said, look, you should ignore this. And you know, when your chosen stamps on the glass under the chuppah, all of that will disappear. All of that, those obstacles, and I've actually since told this to a number of chatanim and kalot, and really they've agreed with this. And it's true. So many problems are beset before the wedding. You know, there's no wedding from engagement to actual stamping on the glass and the chuppah. There's no wedding which goes by smooth as clockwork. Very, very rare. There's always something that happens to some degree or other. But you know, once the glass gets stamped, that all evaporates. That's what he told the girl. And Baruch Hashem, the story did have a happy ending. She married him, and they had have a wonderful marriage, and they have wonderful children, Baruch Hashem. So you can see the point of this is that we're not looking for these external signs. We don't place any importance on these external signs. We want to look at the person themselves. Is there Yirat Shamayim there? Is this a person I want to spend the rest of my life building a Jewish home with? These are the criteria. We don't need anything outside of that, any miracles, anything. So we go literally for the important things that count. Yirat Son, Hashem should put us in the right direction. That we should always make zivugim and shiluchim, not just marriage partners. Many of us are beyond that. I'm talking about shiluchim and zivugim when Hashem is mezaveg a person into different situations. Hashem should always lead us and guide us into that we should be connected with the right situations, and Hashem should connect us with the greatest situation He could ever connect us with, and that is the situation of the Beit Shlishi, and Mashiach Tzidkenu may it happen in our times. Amen.